Hello, it's Deborah from Attic Lane, and this is the third part of our series about using your own interests to spark your own inspiration. So in my introductory video I explained that when we're looking for inspiration we imagine it's something amazing and mystical that just sort of lands on the artist's head and off they go. And it doesn't work like that. I think it's more mundane. And my recommendation is when you're thinking about inspiration, don't use the word inspiration. Substitute what inspires you by what interests you. So if you have an interest in maybe dogs or books or butterflies or in this case moths, then use that as the launch pad for your own creativity. What I've done in each of these little videos is I've started with an interest of my own, in this case the naming of moths. The names of moths are amazing, and it's something that I stumbled across quite recently, and I decided to have a little bit of time on Google to understand different names and to see what different names there were, and I was amazed. Some of them are just beautiful. Kentish Glory, Merveille de Jour, Mistletoe Marble. These are for moths, and it made me think of moths in a slightly different way. So that was where I started from. So I got a bunch of names, I typed them into a Word document, and I changed the font, and I changed the colour of the font. I made it grey. I used grey because that's a fantastic background for all sorts of colours, and then I added some words, some individual words that I can use to mix together and make little phrases or sentiments, and I printed it all off on my printer. To begin with, I took my sheet of words and I cut it down to make 2 tag sizes. Now I'm going to use this as a template because you don't need a die cutter to make a tag. You just need a pencil and something to act as your outline. And I want 2. And what I'll do to try and get the sizes about right is I'll cut one slightly smaller than this outside piece, and then I'll cut the second one slightly smaller than that, but I'll use these as my guide. So these have been cut pretty roughly. They're not terribly accurate, but that doesn't matter. So this one is slightly smaller than the outer black piece, and then this one is slightly smaller again, as you can see if I compare it against the previous one. The reason it doesn't matter if they are not exactly accurate is because I'm going to rough these up quite a lot. On this tag you can see there are 2 layers, and they've been roughed up quite extensively around the edges and curled in and ripped a little bit with scissors. So let me show you some of the ways that you can do this. Let's start with this one. Before I start doing any folding, I'm going to put it into the crease of my scissors, right into that little bit there. And I'm going to run my scissors down it, and then I can make it really rough. And when I've got it very rough, then I'm going to take an ink pad. This is Distress Oxide Weathered Wood. I'm going to run it down the side. I'm also going to use a dry baby wipe to just rub that ink in. I'm going to continue doing that all around both of these tags. Now that I've got a layer of colour around the outside and that's been roughed up, I want to add some extra interest with these little patches of colour. So I'm going to show you how to do that. First of all, I'm going to take a scrap of paper and I'm going to rip away an edge, like that. Then I'm going to take the same dry baby wipe that I used to smudge these edges. I'm going to use my Distress Oxide Weathered Wood. I'm going to knock off some of that colour because it's quite intense and I don't need it to be that intense. When I'm happy that it's all nice and soft, I'm going to take the smallest of these pieces, because that's the one that's going to be uppermost, and I'm just going to put my little scrap of paper across it, and I'm going to rub very gently below with my slightly inked up wet wipe, and now you can see that I've got a nice bit of texture across there. I should say this is a dry wipe, it's not a wet wipe. So I usually have a bunch of these hanging around drying. They don't take long to dry. And this way I can add lots and lots of interest to my tag. And it also means that these words that are in the background sort of recede even more into the background. You can see they're there, you can see there's something there, you can see there's texture, but it's only if you went in really closely you'd be able to read what the grey text was actually saying. I quite like that. And this is where your ideas can begin to really spark what you create. As an example of what I mean, in this tag you see all these fronds, all these pieces of thread that are just hanging there. When you think about the thing that you're interested in, it might begin to spark other ideas, such as wispiness to do with moths and gossamer and silk wings and those sorts of words. And that can clue you in to how to capture more of the object of your interest in your finished piece. And I deliberately kept some of these threads really long, really loose, to help emphasize the sort of floatiness of butterflies and moths. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This has now got some nice colour on it. This one doesn't need extra texture because it's underneath the top one. I'm going to add lots of extra curly bits. Just push those edges around. This would work for all sorts of things. If you're doing fairies, if your interest was in fairies, you could really have some fun with this technique as well. I'm going to do the same with the bottom piece. The bottom piece doesn't need quite as much work on it as the top piece because it's underneath. What I did next was I layered these on top of each other like this. So it looked as if there was lots of layering going on. And then once I'd sort of got them on top of each other like that, I took them to my sewing machine and I sewed lots of straight lines, maybe 3 straight lines down this side. I had 2 little lines down this side, and this is when I decided I was going to leave these fronds of the thread from the sewing nice and long. Next thing that I did was I discovered I couldn't find my butterfly stamp, which is what I had wanted originally. I was going to stamp butterflies on this, and then I was going to leave my little fronds, and that was going to be my basic tag design finish, but I couldn't find it. So this is a good example of where the things that interest you can lead you into all sorts of other directions. So if you're interested in a stamp but you find you've only got a die, let's use the die. This is a Tim Holtz die. It's number 659575. Let's see if it has a name. No, it doesn't have a name. Decorative strip. So this is a decorative strip of butterflies. From this decorative strip I used maybe the first 4 or 5 inches because I couldn't find my long cutting plates either. So I just used the first half, and I cut out a large butterfly and some medium ones and some little ones, and I cut them out in 3 different colours. So I used black, a medium grey and then a soft grey. And then I layered them up 2 at a time, but I layered them slightly offset. So sometimes I would use a larger one on the background and a smaller one on the foreground, and I used all the different greys that I had. Then what I did was I put them through my sewing machine. Now I hope that you can see this on the camera. This is a technique that's used in patchwork, and I learned it when I learned how to make patchwork quilts some years ago. You put the first butterflies through your sewing machine, and then you sew blank stitches. And then you feed the next set of butterflies through your sewing machine, and then you leave some blank stitches, and what you end up with is all of these little butterflies all connected up together. Then I stuck them down onto my background, and the way that I did that was on some of them I used foam pads on the back, some of them I glued straight down onto the background, but then when I had here this wing sticks up. I wanted to create lots of dimension, and again your subject matter will clue you in to what to do. So if you know that you want to have dimension on wings, a good way to do it so they don't end up being completely flat is to stick another little foam pad in between the top set of foam wings, the top set of wings and the bottom set of wings. So here is an extra foam pad between the wings, and here again. So it's just in the centre there, and that's just enough to press down, and it means that that will never close down completely. There'll always be dimension. I decided to add a phrase that says take flight. So I got this from my words. Now the words are all spaced out in such a way that you can cut them individually and you can use them to create sentiments. And I backed two words, take flight, these ones here. I separated them. I could have kept them together, but I decided to separate them because that's fitted better than a long sentiment across the bottom of my tag. So putting them one above the other was a better fit for the design, and I backed them onto black card, and that's exactly what I did with the rest of my tag. Once I'd got my two pieces and my design complete and all my stitches done, on these two pieces the stitches showed through. So what I did was I got a needle and I threaded all the threads and I pulled them through to the front, and then I was able to back my tag with a nice black background that isn't disturbed by unsightly little bits of thread straggling around underneath the background. And it also meant that I had more of these to pull forward to the front to add to my feathery effect. This is glitter gloss, and just adding them onto the wings, especially on the black wings. They had a real impact on the black wings, and that way you get a lovely shimmer. To complete everything, I took two sets of Nuvo drops. So these ones are called Dazzling Blue, and they've got a bit of glitter in them, and they created these nice shimmery shiny drops here. And I took another one called Bohemian Teal, and that was a nice match for the weathered wood ink that I'd used to create this textured look, and I just interspersed them among my butterflies, or moths. By the end of the project they had become interchangeable: butterflies, moths, moths, butterflies. So I hope that that gives you an idea of how you could be inspired by your own interests, and you can develop that interest into something that is quite creative. I hope you'll join me for part 4 of our series about finding your own interests and using them to give you inspiration. And until we meet again, take care.